Hello, people of the internet. How are you doing? Let's take a look at our stream. Oh, are we streaming? Hello, people of the internet. Here we are. Well, welcome back to the stream where we're going to go over some more stuff about Bitcoin, or rather blockchain fees. And we're going to talk specifically about Bitcoin fees and see why they've been so high lately. See if we can find some examples of that. Well, I guess they've been down recently. But in June 2018, they were very high. And Exodus is a wallet that's going to give us an explanation as to why. Bitcoin fees charged in Exodus wallet are something that not everyone can understand at first, so we've written an extensive article to explain in details how they are formed. The Bitcoin network calculates fees based on the number of transactions and the size in bytes of each transaction. The size of a transaction depends on the number of inputs and that hold funds. The more inputs you have, the more expensive the transaction. What that means basically is if you have a Bitcoin transaction on the network, sometimes they're combined with other transactions, so you have more than one input, more than one address putting Bitcoin into that transaction where it goes to other addresses. Please note that the fees are not based on the amount of Bitcoin involved in the transaction, as many Bitcoin users are confused about this. One of the easiest ways to think about this is with change in dollars. $1 is the same as 100 pennies. However, it requires more work to count 100 pennies and give it to someone for payment than it does to hand over a $1 bill. This is similar to the Bitcoin network. Let's look at an example. Alice receives 0.01 Bitcoins every day from her mining contract for 100 days. Bob receives a payment of 1 Bitcoin once. Both Alice and Bob now have a 1 Bitcoin balance. If Alice and Bob now try to send 1 Bitcoin, Alice will have a much larger fee than Bob. This is because the Bitcoin network has a lot more work for Alice to bundle all of her small change inputs together compared to Bob, who is just one input. This is similar to everyone who tries to spend 100 pennies versus a $1 bill. Both amounts have the same value, but the 100 pennies take longer to count, so it is harder to make a transaction. If you receive small payments over time from a mining contract, you're collecting pennies, essentially. When you send these dozens of small inputs as one payout, the Bitcoin network requires these inputs to be smushed together and batched into one payment. The fees on these transactions are far higher than those with sending more reasonable 1 to 3 input transactions. We have seen fees as high as $50 to $200 for mining contract payouts that have gone on for years. In a few cases, the fee required to send your Bitcoin is higher than your Bitcoin balance. Because of this, we advise users to either receive larger payouts less frequently or receive their payouts in an asset like Ethereum, which we're actually going to look at in the next session, which does not use the same UTXO-based system as Bitcoin or Litecoin, and thus will not have an exorbitant mining fees because of it. Example case. The following is an example of a customer paying $16 in fees. You can see it here in this transaction. The fee is located under inputs and outputs. Now the reason why this customer was charged this much is twofold. Number one, they had many inputs, which we'll see in this screenshot and when we look at the actual transaction. And the Bitcoin network charges a fee per byte, and every input is about 152 bytes. If the Bitcoin network charges a fee per byte and the price for each byte is 210 satoshis at the time of the transaction, this roughly translates to 1.2 cents per byte. The total bytes for this transaction was 1369. You can see this under summary. So if we multiply those values, we get $16.41 in network fees. If you are receiving mining deposits, let's look at this transaction now. It doesn't look like the one that he's talking about. Because I only see 3 transactions, or inputs. Looks like they linked the wrong transaction. If you're receiving mining deposits, each deposit creates 152 bytes worth of input, so we would recommend using a wallet that supports fee customization to receive low volume payouts like this. That way you can reduce but not eliminate the fees needed to consolidate the mining deposit inputs. Electrum is an excellent option for doing this. You may also consider using the wallet service at blockchain.info. Note that you can always see the network fee that you will be charged before completing any transaction in Exodus, which is just specific to Exodus. It tells you the fees here at the bottom of the send screen. Here's an example. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us. So let's change our description here in our live stream.
Let's pray there is more than we know as the countryside clears and the cities full of the world. The world is yours. Let's pray it doesn't bring
So let's take a look at why it went down.
people who woke and there was unusual fears of the world. The world is yours.
So it was $26 and now it's down to $3. The average cost of sending a Bitcoin transaction is cheaper than it's been in a year and a half, showing the price isn't the cryptocurrency's only unpredictable metric these days. But with all the debate about growing fees, this might come as a surprise. After all, it wasn't so long ago that fees were so high, a group of prominent investors and miners created a whole new version of Bitcoin, mostly to keep fees lower. Backing up a bit, much of the conflict centered on the fact that while called fees, these expenses are best considered as transaction costs that are necessary to the network, as necessary as paying for someone to deliver a protocol service, be it SMS, VoIP, or email, or even a pizza. This is because Bitcoin is a software that requires all of the many thousands of computers that run to stay in sync. To do so easily, there's a limit on how much data the network can process at intervals, and users need to pay more to get their transactions in a time of congestion. So that's our answer there. The Bitcoin network was congested, and that's why it cost so much. So as Bitcoin grew more popular in the last year, fees skyrocketed to over $25, according to a graph of data from a website, BitInfoCharts. Bitcoin users those who truly rely on the protocol for essentials have been affected by this, as were those who believe Bitcoin could be competitive with legacy payment systems. But Bitcoin fees have fizzled out, declining since the end of December. Here's a graph. So why did fees take the nosedive? The simple answer is users are making fewer transactions right now. In December, there were roughly 400,000 transactions per day, while today Bitcoin is seeing only 200,000, according to the data from blockchain.info. I think it's really simple, BitGo CEO Mike Belch told CoinDesk. There's substantially less transaction demand. The question, he added, is why has there been a decrease in transactions? SegWit and beyond. If Twitter and Reddit are any indication, sentiment on the matter tends to be influenced by personal politics. In this case, where users stand in Bitcoin's long-standing block size debate, which at its core was about network economics. Popular Twitter figure Armand von Bitcoin cheered that the low fees mean the scaling debates are now a thing of the past, pending the development partly on growing adoption of segregated witness, a scaling feature at the center of Bitcoin's long-raging fee debate. And there is truth to the claims. SegWit was just segregated witness was just a fork in the blockchain chain that happened to help the fees, and SegWit reduces transaction fees and adds more space to the blockchain, but it still isn't widely adopted, so it's hard to say how much actually helped. There hasn't been much of a recent increase in SegWit use either. For the past several months, only about 10 to 14% of transactions, according to SegWit tracking site SegWit Party. Plus, SegWit doesn't reduce the number of transactions, it makes each one cheaper. Another possibility, according to Belch, is that fee prices finally force some larger transaction processors to implement a technology called batching, rolling many transactions into one to leave more space on the blockchain. Indeed, exchanges like Coinbase have said they've worked on implementing this feature in the past. And Thursday, whenever this article was written, cryptocurrency exchange Shapeshift announced that it now batches transactions, making a point that it makes up 2% of all transfers that occur on the Bitcoin blockchain, which is tremendous. However, it's a theory that's difficult to get hard data on unless an exchange were to formally announce that they were using this technique. This is hard to confirm with 100% certainty, Wells said. Still, he argued that even if one of large exchange started batching transactions, it could have a huge impact on the overall transaction load. These sorts of technical theories add to the idea that developers and those building services on top of Bitcoin can make optimizations in order to free up space on the blockchain without compromising some of its core features. This is why Bitcoin Core works so hard to get the layered 2 transactions working, and why they focus on so much on optimization of the size of transaction through various things like Schnorr and bulletproofs, Exomedia CEO John Carhall said, adding, they are doing everything to minimize the footprint of every type of transaction attached to Bitcoin because they are all stored forever. Ditching Bitcoin. Others, especially, and this is actually our next session, but we can roll it all into one. Others, especially those critical of how Bitcoin developers favor a smaller blockchain and limited transaction space, argue the lower fees are a consequence of people that are sick of and tired of the high fees of Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't useful for anything that involves low fees, so people are migrating to alternatives. This has consequences of lowering the fees on Bitcoin, said Brian X. Charles, founder of Yours, a media startup building on Bitcoin Cash. Charles notably moved his startup off of the Bitcoin blockchain last year, migrating to alternatives before building on Bitcoin Cash. It's possible that some users are doing the same. Payment processor Stripe stopped accepting Bitcoin in January payments due to the high fees, and BitPay, a startup that offers a payment services over Bitcoin, has differentiated into supporting multiple protocols for its merchants. Yet, if they're pushing users elsewhere, it's not clear where they're going. Bitcoin Cash, the cryptocurrency created as a cheaper alternative to Bitcoin, still has about 10% of the number of transactions that Bitcoin currently does. Apparently, high fees don't incentivize folks to switch to Bcash, BitGo engineer Jameson Lopp said. Bitcoin developer Manny Rosenfeld doesn't think so either. In fact, he disagrees with both of the above theories. The main reason for the drop in Bitcoin transaction fees is not SegWit adoption, and it's not people moving to Bitcoin Cash. It's simply that the craze for buying cryptocurrencies in general has calmed down, he tweeted. Indeed, there's been a downtick in outside interest in Bitcoin. A lower price has less new investors searching for Bitcoin in Google and coming in to buy and trade the cryptocurrency. This view seems supported by the fact that the second most valuable blockchain by market cap, Ethereum, has also seen a dramatic drop in fees in recent months. The same goes for Litecoin, clocking in at number 5, and XRP at third place. Charles also argued that it's possible Bitcoin's waning hype cycle has contributed to lower fees. I wouldn't be surprised if Ethereum is also lower due to the decline in market value, Charles said, adding, there may simply be less demand for descending transactions across all blockchains. We went through a hype cycle. And it's also possible the low fees were caused by a mix of the factors described above. And I don't think we need the rest of this article. So that brings us to 12 minutes on this particular session. And I think we'll take a break for the time being. So that again, we just covered why do Bitcoin fees become prohibitively high? Why are they now decreasing? What solutions exist to offset high Bitcoin transaction fees, such as SegWit, batching, and ditching Bitcoin? Thank you very much, and we'll be back for the next session in just a few minutes.